So this is David Dunne.
Hello, Paul.
Yeah, the star of radio and a pioneer of house music.
Yeah, I think a lot of disagree with that. Yeah, I don't think so. I think I've been around. I've been around a while.
Yeah. We were just chatting then, and we were saying that we'd start at the first club you went to.
The very first club I went to, and first of all, I know it will be hard to imagine for anybody watching this, but I'm actually 62. I know that's a shock. So I started clubbing in the 70s, so I was 14 when I went to my first club, which was actually in my hometown of Swinton. So Swinton is a little town now classed as Salford.
Yeah.
And in those days, a lot of towns had a local club. It might not have been a big flashy place, but most places had a local club. So Swinton had a place called the Wishing Well that had been there for years in Station Road near the centre.
I used to go to that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The Wishing Well, they used to do in 1976, they used to do an under-18s disco on a Wednesday night. But the thing about it, and this is how times have changed, is that it was actually open to anyone, but under-18s could go in on that night, but the bar was open.
Yeah.
So they were serving alcohol and everything, but the idea was if you were under 18, you just wouldn't get served at the bar. But it was basically like a normal club night.
Yeah.
And that is, the reason that's important to me is I was very shy in those days, and I was fascinated by what the DJ did. And the DJ there was a guy called Mike Prince, who's still around, and he worked there. Every night was open all week, every week, 52 weeks a year. And I used to stand, because I was shy and couldn't really talk to anybody, I used to stand and watch what he did, because he had like a DJ box over the dance floor. So I was into music. I already had, been buying records since I was a little kid, but never seen what a DJ did. And so he had these two decks, and he put one on, and then I'd notice while that one was playing, he had this telephone receiver plugged in.
Yeah.
And after about 6 months ago, I picked up the courage to actually talk to him and asked him what it was, and he said, "Well, I can hear that record in there, and that's how I know where to bring it in." It's like, okay, so I used to watch him do that. He used to go on the mic. They all went on the mic in those days. But I remember watching him just being fascinated by what this person did and how he could fill a dance floor and all the different types of music that he'd play. And he had all the chat as well, and all the girls seemed to love him.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to me, but that you could do that as a job, because that was his full-time job.
Yeah.
He was a DJ. And I think that, and also going in a club, the very first time, and I've always remembered this, you go in, music is loud.
Yeah.
It's not even, now we've all got these pumped up speakers at home or in our cars. We had a little stereo. You go in and you hear these records loud.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'll never forget going in that first time and going, this is incredible, This little club in Swinton, it was just amazing.
Yeah.
So that's actually the first club I ever went in was in my hometown of Swinton. To those
What music were they playing in there?
Well, it was a mixture of everything. So
Yeah.
the interesting thing about Mike, the resident, so he played chart stuff. So he played things like silly love songs.
Yeah.
He'd play Elton John. He'd play the pop stuff. But he was actually the buyer at a record shop called Robinson's Records.
Yeah, I remember
which was
that.
on Blackfriars Street.
Yeah.
Amazing record shop.
Yeah.
Didn't get mentioned a lot, but it was really big, and it had racks of imports. So it was one, we all know about spinning, and that was very specialist. And we know about Yanks maybe that came a few years later.
Yeah.
But Robinson's Records had all kinds of imports, and he was the buyer.
Yeah.
So what he would do was he'd play these records in between the chart stuff. And he loved soul and disco and funk, so he played a lot of that. But in between, he'd play these records that he was getting from America. So all these disco and funk records. And that's where I heard loads of these things for the first time that that weren't well known, but he played them all the time, so they became hits.
Yeah.
In this little club in Swinton.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was his other job until I went into Manchester one weekend and went to Robinson's Records, and there he was, and that was his other job. So it was a mixture of chart and funk and soul and disco and pop with these quite obscure records that he'd import.
I didn't know that you could buy disco. Me and my mate went on a hike yesterday, and we were chatting about disco, and I was saying that I'd love to get a compilation album of like stuff that didn't get in the charts. Like, but I didn't realise that disco tracks was being imported.
There weren't many shops in those days that did them. You had to really hunt around. I mean, I didn't really, I don't know if I'm honest, I don't know if spinning was around in that period in the 70s, but we found Robinson's records, and he was importing all kinds of stuff from the States. So, and he would have a lot of the kind of the disco records there. But obviously disco had also crossed over by that point. It was hits, it was in the charts anyway.
Yeah.
But he had all these American imports, but for my pocket money, 14, 15, I couldn't afford them. You know, I was having to buy the 50p jukebox singles from Woolworths because we didn't have a lot of cash when I was a kid.
Without the hole in.
Without the hole.
So you'd have to put your own hole in.
Plastic thing in.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I ever saw imported records. And then years later, when a shop called Yanks opened off Oxford Street, they used to buy what they call the cutouts. So it was basically the overstocks in America. And they're called cutouts because what they'd do is it was remaindered stock that hadn't sold. They'd ship back to the wholesalers, and then they would sell them on again to the guy from Yanks. Used to go and buy containers full and have them shipped over.
Did I?
But they would cut off the corner to indicate that they're being sent away.
Yeah.
So they were called cut-offs, and that was the only other place then around that time. Probably that's later in the 70s, where you would see all these American albums and Canadian albums and singles that were imported. You know, the pure soul boys who might have been going to the soul stuff knew a lot more about imports. You know, if they were going to Blackpool or, you know, Wigan to some degree, Blackpool or the soul circuit, they knew all about the import stuff. But you know, as a spotty little herbert, I didn't realise anything about that then.
Would that have been Northern Soul and
Well, the Northern Soul thing, that's a whole of that. You need to do about 15 videos to get to the bottom of Northern Soul, and I'm not an expert, but I think on the soul, you know, soul and Northern Soul, two different genres of music at that era, rarely crossed. But imports were a big thing for those scenes. But me going into Robinson's Records, buying the new 12-inch Blondie single, was not an import.
Yeah, I used to buy Deep Purple. I had a period where I was into rock music, so I would buy all my rock. I think it was in the back bit of Yanks. You used to get all the...
Yeah, they were big on that kind of stuff there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I went to school in Salford, a place called De La Salle. Not that far away, really, from where we are now.
Yeah.
It was a boys' grammar. So in that period, particularly 75, 76, 77, or 75 into 76, they were all into Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, everybody.
Yeah.
And I had a friend called Paul Flanagan who lived in Little Hulton, and I used to go and see him a lot. And I went round, and we'd always, those days, you'd take an album to somebody's house and you'd listen to it together, you and your mate or your mates. Yeah. Probably only one of you could afford to buy an LP. Yeah. So, you know, you'd do it and you'd all go and listen to it. And I went round to his house and he went, I've just got this, listen to this. And what was it? He went, it's by the Ramones. I'm going, who are they? He went, they're an American punk band.
Yeah.
And he put it on and it was like, what is this? You know, because at that point, I wasn't hearing anything like that really in England. And there was a few of us who loved punk, but at our school, you would get ripped to death at that point because everybody was into heavy rock.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of, until you got to about 79, that's kind of out of punk new wave time, when then it was cool. But I remember at that point, you know, you couldn't even really say that you like that stuff because you go, it's not proper music, you can't fucking play, can't play. So yeah, it was an interesting time, that kind of mid 70s to end of the 70s for how music changed.
Yeah. How did you get into electronic music?
Well, really, it was out of punk, and I think a lot of people had the same thing, that you had punk, which was forget all that other stuff, forget all that, you know, 15 time changes, double neck guitars, all this, you know, Henry VIII on Ice stuff, and let's strip it all back, and anybody can pick up a guitar and learn 3 chords or the bass or the drums.
Yeah.
And then cheap synths appeared, you know, one note synths, but synths came in, and you started hearing this stuff, and we'd heard, you know, Kraftwerk had been around for a few years by then, and there was some bits and bobs floating over from other parts of Europe, but then suddenly there was just, it was like alternative music came into being out of punk. And the synth and electronic stuff came out of that. So a lot of people who went into that kind of scene had come out of punk, had really come out of punk.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, if you were interested in what's the next new thing, what's new and exciting, kind of that was where it was kind of going, you know, because suddenly synths had been, you know, for solos in a Rick Wakeman concept album, and now suddenly drum machines. So you had drum machines, you know, they weren't even having real drummers.
Yeah.
So it was just the technology led the music almost, and I think that was where, you know, and you have things like that first Joy Division album, which is kind of punk but is its own thing and has this amazing production around it, and you know, this Stephen Morris with his one syndrome, but these like, you know, machine-like drumming. It just kind of morphed then.
Yeah.
So I think the electronic thing really, it was like, right, this is next, isn't it?
Yeah.
Listen to this record. You know, we hadn't heard that 3 years ago. Well, we've never heard anything like this now.
Yeah.
Listen to this is by the Normal. Listen to this Warm Leatherette. Have you heard this?
Yeah.
You know, DAF, have you heard this? So it kind of came out. It came out of that really, and Pips, I think, for me was like, and a lot of people in Manchester, was a fundamental shift of that, because it had kind of started in, you know, what we used to call, when I first went, the Roxy room. You know, some people call it the Bowie room. You know, this room where they played largely alternative stuff.
Yeah.
So it might be, you know, punk and post-punk. It might be things like Iggy Pop and the Stooges, loads of Bowie, loads of Roxy, obviously. And then this other stuff started to creep in. These electronic records started to come in. So it became this mishmash of what got, you know, broadly speaking, alternative was what the music press called it on the radio. But it kind of was this mishmash. You didn't have to just like one thing. You could have all these things together, but it was all going forward. That was the point about it. It's like, right, going to go forward. And, you know, you couldn't really go to many clubs in Manchester in 1979 and hear, or 1980 and hear that stuff anywhere else.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go and hear that, you know, that was where you went.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine now, but you know, even a record as well known as Cars or Our Friends Electric by Gary Numan, which was a massive hit. At first it wasn't.
Yeah.
And you heard that stuff and you're like, what's this?
Yeah.
You know, this is
that must have been amazing in the club.
Yeah, you know, it just seemed like every 6 months from punk onwards, things changed a bit.
Yeah.
And like it was like kind of it morphed into something else.
Yeah.
In that period from say 77 to even 82, 83 when I'd gone away to Liverpool to uni then. But it was a really fundamental thing for a lot of us, because it was just like all that stuff that was around for like 8 or 9 years has gone.
Yeah.
You know, there might still be people buying it there, but you know, if you were like 17, 18, 19, you wanted the next, what's next?
Yeah, yeah. And when you were in Liverpool, that's when you started DJing, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was my first ever DJ gig was at De La Salle College in my sixth form, and I did it only because they had a sixth form disco, and I bought disco kit and then realised they'd never play records, and they knew I had loads of singles and I had all kinds of singles.
Yeah.
So they said, "Will you do it?" So I got 50p and free pop. But then when I went to uni in Liverpool, this was in the days when you got a student grant, which, you know, unthinkable now. So all your fees were paid, halls of residence were paid, and you had about 30 quid a week to live on in 1981, 82. And when I went to uni, in the campus social club, they had music every night, and the Students' Union ran it, and I found out you could get 30 quid a night to DJ. Yeah. So I got myself into the Student Union, and kind of sort of said, I did some DJing when I was at sixth form, not telling them I'd done 2 gigs. And they went, well, we need a DJ. Yeah, can you do 2 nights a week? I'm thinking, that's like 60 quid. That's like double my grant. So that was how I started, really. I can't say it was with any degree of thinking this is a vocation and this is my career, or it's going to do it, because that wasn't what DJing was. Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't have thought I'd go and play in actual clubs. Yeah. But it was, you kind of had to think on your feet, because you've got all kinds of people, so you had to play all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And it could get quite rowdy if you put on a record they didn't like. Yeah. So it was a good way to learn how to read a room and try and figure out what can I put on next sort of work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did that for a few years. But my focus really then was I'd played drums in bands since I was 13, 14. Went away to uni and they had a music department, so loads of musicians.
Yeah.
So, and not many drummers. So, you know, I was at that point dreaming of being a drummer in a band. I can't say at that point, right, DJing is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I really focused on that. When I came back in '86, I got into the local band circuit in Manchester.
Yeah.
And kind of the DJing went to the side then because I was just, you know, it didn't.
What bands were you in?
Well, I played a couple of bands regularly. So there was a band called Money Jungle, which was kind of jazz and soul inflected. Keyboard player was a guy called John Ellis, who's now a really respected sort of jazz keyboard player.
Yeah.
Fantastic musician. And then I was in a band called Bernie Hot Hot for about 3 years. For which, for about 9 months, our lead singer was Paulette, as in DJ Paulette.
Oh,
so that was the first time I ever met Paulette. And out there on the internet, there is a picture of us with Paulette as the lead singer.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's when I first met her.
Yeah.
Back then.
You'll have to send me that if you can find it.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is. It's I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, but so yeah, and we just we did mostly supports, but then you go and play in pubs, bars. There was a real thriving local music circuit in Manchester and the towns around. Loads of pubs would have bands on. So you might not earn a lot of money, but you could. We used to gig Thursday, Friday, Saturday almost every week.
Yeah.
Because you could. And we were really lucky in that probably around, when would it be? Probably around 88, 89. A guy called Roger Eagle, who's quite famous really.
Yeah.
Liverpool, Liverpool and Manchester, he ran Eric's, amongst other things. Took a shine to us, and so he gave us loads of great supports.
Yeah.
And booked us on other gigs outside of Manchester. Fascinating man. So we did that. But in 1990 I moved to London, so kind of the band thing went. But at the same time as I'm doing that, house music happened.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of, that also got in the way sometimes because it was kind of, I wanted to go out and I couldn't because we had a gig.
Yeah.
So I was always happy if a gig would finish early, if it was an early evening gig in a pub, because I could, maybe get to a club by 11 then in that case, 11:30. So it was a weird, there was a lot going on in my life then. There's a lot of stuff, because, you're in your mid-20s and you're hungry and no kids, no mortgage. You just want to do as much as you can. I got my first job. It was just, all the stuff in Manchester was happening at that period. It was a fascinating place to be. That 87 to 90 period was really interesting.
I forget the timeline, so Anif, he sent me a link, and I'm going off at a tangent a little bit, but he sent me a link. It's in 1986, and Foot Patrol are dancing to Acid House in Moss Side. So I always thought associate house music when I first discovered it properly in 1988. But I forget, because there was the radio show Stu Allen, so we used to listen to it on Sunday night, and we used to I think that's where I first heard Voodoo Ray. But there was your radio show, so you were the first to just play house music, weren't you?
On legal radio, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, let's tell the truth. So I'm at Piccadilly Radio. Got my first job. I was in production. So this would be 87. I started working there, May 87. I'm going out already at this point, and sort of like really keen. 88, house music is getting bigger and bigger. And I'd been banging on relentlessly about how we should have, a Hacienda show. My view was, we need a show with those guys on.
Yeah.
Stuart started to introduce an hour of house into his show.
Yeah.
But didn't want to do more than that at that point. So he was still holding on to, he wanted to do the soul, and he wanted to do hip hop, but he didn't want to do more than an hour of house music. So I'm pushing and really annoying the program director. And so he said, all right, we'll do it. And Terry Christian was working there. So we got Terry to do a demo with, I think it was Mike and Graham. I know it was definitely Mike. He wasn't too keen on it. And I said, why don't we just do a live recording? So they recorded, I think it was a New Year's Eve at the Hacienda. So they did a full, Atmos mics around the place, did a full recording, and they did try that. And then finally it was like, right, well, let's do a dance show in the middle of the week. So Terry Christian was the first host of it.
Yeah.
But very soon after it started, he left the station.
Yeah.
And if I'm really honest, I was really hacked off. Might as well be truthful.
Yeah.
I was really hacked off he got it. I was presenting shows at that time.
Yeah.
And I was desperate to do it. And I loved house music.
Yeah.
I am not saying Terry Christian didn't know anything about house music.
Yeah.
But his stuff was more guitar based.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great musical knowledge, but he was from a guitar point of view. So I was really gutted that he got it.
Yeah.
So when he left, it was like, can I do that show?
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah. So they gave in at that point and cracked.
Yeah.
And let me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when I was looking, doing a little bit of research on you, and you became the head of MTV, didn't you?
Yeah,
Youth
that's some years. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's 97. That
Yeah.
was, I'd done. So I'd been working. We did Kiss 102 in Manchester and Kiss 105 in Yorkshire, and then moved back down to London to take that job. Yeah. It was Kiss had just been sold to Chrysalis Radio, and it was weird because when I was doing the interviews for MTV, I didn't know the sale was happening.
Yeah.
And I handed in my notice. I got this offer to go and do this job, and I thought, why not? It's quite frankly, the pay was really good. It was a great job in London. It seemed exciting going to MTV, and they wanted somebody with a dance music background. So I was like, fine. Handed in my notice, and then the MD guy took me aside and went, I'm really glad for you you've done this because we're about to sell the station. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to go very well.
Yeah.
It was coincidental that I'd literally just handed in my notice, and then I think the same week they announced the sale of the station to Chrysalis, who then turned it into Galaxy.
Yeah.
It was. So I went down to was at MTV for a while.
Do you know when I did a video of Anif? So he's obviously older than me, and I assumed that there'd be electro night somewhere and there'd be a funk night somewhere, and Anif was saying, well, in the club you didn't really have that because you'd have a mixture of stuff. You couldn't do that. You couldn't have just a house music night. Well, there weren't enough tracks there anyway, but it was a mishmash of records. But then through the 90s, house music really took over, didn't it? And
I would say in Manchester, once like John De Silva's Hot Night on that midweek in the Hacienda, once that had got to the end of its summer run and it was full every week, it was, although they would play stuff that wasn't house in there, in there house had predominantly took over on Friday and Saturday nights. So Dave Haslam would still mix it up. There would still be a mixture, but certainly by the time I left, say, Manchester in 1990, it was predominantly house music, and it had moved to clubs outside. You had places, in Farnworth, you had places in Bolton, you had a scene outside of it, Wigan, so there. But I would say he is, and if he's right, as he always is, in the 90s, that's when really everything else got kind of pushed out because it had crossed over so much after that first initial period that it kind of became right. This is what clubs are really.
It did. It changed the landscape completely, didn't it? There must have been about 8 different clubs in the city centre, and I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think, but there must have been about 8 that were predominantly house music, and probably people build up like it in
well, I mean, if outside of, say, somewhere, like in the village where there might be, Les Cacao might be playing high energy somewhere. But it had done it there. And ironically, what had also happened is that local band circuit that I'd been in the pubs, as you got into the 90s, they replaced all the bands with DJs. Yeah. Because people wanted to hear dance music, even in the bars and the pubs before they went out. And of course, for a publican, a licensee, what's simpler, having a 5-6 piece band rock up and take over your pub all day and do sound checks and be really noisy, or one bloke with a couple of boxes of records brilliant.
Yeah.
So they loved DJs
Yeah.
because it was clean and simple, and it was like, it's one bloke.
Yeah.
Fantastic. No sound check.
Yeah.
Kit's there. Don't have wires. So it also wiped out a lot of that local band circuit really as well.
Yeah.
I went back into, certainly in that mid-90s period when I was at KISS, I started playing in a couple of bands then as well. And there was really very few places to play then in the city centre, really very few indeed.
Yeah.
Compared to, say, 10 years previous when I'd been doing it. And literally, every pub would have bands on. So, it kind of wiped that out as well. It changed what people wanted to hear in pubs and bars.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, because I got a job in town in 1987, and then my workmates got me into indie, and I got them into house. But I remember, like, 88, 89, there was loads of bands on and venues, and then it just completely decimated it, didn't it?
I mean, you still had the Boardwalk for a long time.
Yeah.
And the International was open for quite a while, and you had the Roadhouse, and there was a couple of other bits and bobs, but compared to, say, 86 when I came home and got into that band, 86, 87, there was just, pubs would have bands in, Fridays and Saturdays, Thursdays, local, we used to go and play in a place in Chorlton, all the Fallowfield, all the towns around would have places where they have bands on.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, I'm doing those other gigs, and you're kind of struggling to find a gig a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not a famous name, it's just those small band venues are gone, and even the Roadhouse in the end became the home of Electric Chair.
Yeah.
One of the best known clubs in that period in Manchester, late 90s. So, yeah, it's interesting how that thing wiped out what had been my previous obsession, really.
Yeah. Do you know, like, we're getting older, aren't we? But I went to the Warehouse Project last week, and you did. And we're in our 50s and 60s, aren't we? But it's still with us, isn't it? We're still into the music. And
I mean, I don't go to classics nights very often.
Yeah. You're still DJing us, though, aren't you?
I still DJ, yeah. It's really weird. So in my head, so I play a lot of disco and funk and soul and eclectic stuff like that. And that's obviously by its nature, a lot of it's old.
Yeah.
And then I'll play newer stuff as well in the mixture. But if it comes to house music, I don't want to really DJ house classics nights. We had a KISS thing recently to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the station, and at that, you play all the stuff we used to play. But I don't really, it's not my thing, and it's no denigration to anybody who goes to them or does them. I understand why, I went to see Elvis Costello the other year. It was great to hear him do all those records from when I was in my teens to my 20s.
Yeah.
All those records I loved, fantastic, no problem. But my thing was always, if I look back to that period, so when I actually started to think about club DJing was 1990, after I've been doing that radio show a couple of years and going as a punter to clubs for those years, and I really wanted to go and do that DJing in a club. I didn't want to play music from 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to Eastern Bloc and buy a load of new records.
Yeah.
And play them.
Yeah.
And then next week get some more and play some of those as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to play new music. And one of the things that works against you when you're a DJ at my age, for most of us, unless you're a really big name, is you don't get offered that many opportunities to play new house.
Do you use records? Do you use vinyl?
Well, yeah, I do. I've gone back to this last year. I've gone back to doing some gigs with vinyl by accident. I got booked to do a gig, and then about a month before, got told, "Oh, you do know they only play vinyl in there." I'm going, really? I haven't played on vinyl since like 2007. But when I say records, new music. But for me, I would love to be able to play new house music, that kind of stuff, and every so often I get the chance to do it, but I don't. I've got a schizophrenia going on. I have no issue playing old disco, soul and funk records.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of contradicting myself really, but something about them, I have no problem doing that. But yeah, most of us who are around and still doing this now, you don't get offered the chance to play new stuff that often, unless you're at a certain level.
Do you know, I went to Annis Berlin exhibition event a couple of weeks ago, and Hugh and Clark was talking, and he said that so he's doing some sort of sound, some technology course at uni, and the younger people have found out that he can mix with vinyl, so they're fascinated by it, and he's showing them how to do it, and then they put an extra bit in the course now, so people can learn how to mix with vinyl.
I mean, apart from anything, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating when you're learning. It did take me a while to get back into the hang of it, but what I'd forgotten, because I went over to CDs in 2006. I was playing for Head Candy then, and I went to do a gig in Washington of all places, and no, Chicago, beg your pardon, with Eric Cooper, and my records got diverted to Washington.
Yeah.
And we arrived, and the gig was that night, and Eric played off CDs by that point.
Yeah.
So he said, you can borrow my CDs. So I had to play off CDs, and kind of at that point I was like, this is a lot easier and quicker, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, not too heavy boxes. So I switched to CDs then, and then eventually about 2010 went to kind of laptop and controller and that kind of digital. I do a bit of record box if I have to. But going back to vinyl DJing, what I'd forgotten was there is no downtime.
Yeah.
So if you're playing on a digital format, it's really easy to find your music, really quick, really simple to queue it up. You know, you've got it there fast. If you're playing out of a bag of records, you've got to find your record. You've got to get it out, make sure it's the right one, queue it up. You know, it's the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten that's how it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a real buzz as well.
Yeah.
Because you're always working against time.
Yeah.
So you're really like hyped on it. It's really fun. I think it sounds, on a good system, it sounds a lot warmer, a lot better. It's tactile. You've got these objects.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's just a lot of fun. But yeah, the first thing I noticed was, wow, there's no time to stand around going, well, I've got that queued in. It's in time. I've got 2 minutes now. So yeah, I do love doing that. It's fun.
So I always try and aim for around half an hour, and I like to end them by getting the person to pick a favourite track. So I'm going to say, I'm curious, what was the first house record that you fell in love with, or one track that...
I can say what my favourite house record is.
Yeah.
That's really easy.
Yeah.
Because I know that, and unsurprisingly with me, it has a story with it. So it's Little Louis' French Kiss.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The first time I ever heard that record was not in the Hacienda. It was in the number 1, Central Street, near the old Bootle Street Nick. And I think it was Nipper who was playing it. I can't be sure. But I was in there. We'd gone in. It was a Wednesday or Thursday night. We'd gone in. We'd been working at Piccadilly, and a bunch of us had just decided to go out afterwards, and we were in there. And I don't know if you ever went to the number 1, but anybody who went there, it was a sweatbox.
Yeah.
Right. One Central Street, when Leroy were in it, was a very swanky club compared to the original number 1, which was really an underground gay club.
Yeah.
So we went in there, and by that point, they're just playing house music. That's what they're playing. Brilliant. And this record came on. And I'm like, what is this? Very electronic.
Yeah.
No lyrics. Just motored as a key change at one point, and by that point I was really hooked on it. And then it gets to that breakdown, which if you've never heard the full length French Kiss, you need to go and listen to that bit.
Yeah.
And again, I've not heard a record do that slowed down and then built back up again.
Yeah.
And by the time it had kicked back in again, it was off. That was the moment when I was like, I want to play this music in the club.
Yeah.
Because I was seeing the reaction around me, of which I was part of. I mean, I'm getting, my hairs are going up on my arms.
Yeah, I'm getting shivers as well.
It was, to hear that in the club for the first time. Nobody knew what was coming. Nobody had heard it before, maybe apart from the DJ. And the reaction, people went nuts.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, I want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is. I still love it as a house record. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change a second of it. It is a bugger to mix in and out of, because the drum machines and the synths are all over the place. Really hard to get in and out of. But I think it's like It's like the shark in Jaws.
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
Yeah, I love that.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's pure E music.
Yeah.
It's E plus pressed into black vinyl.
So thanks so much. I'll just stop recording now.